Yes, we can start now. Okay, so I will ask some of the questions from the floor. The first question is, what is the acceptance rate for these two journals? The acceptance rate.
Right. Let the Learn Journal editor share first, right? The acceptance rate for Learn Journal is about 55 to 65%, right? Yeah, approximately, right?
For Kasa, it's quite similar to Learn, about 50 to 60%.
Thank you so much. Let's have the next question.
Yes, the next question is, how long should we, as an author, wait for the journal's response for our manuscript?
So in a normal situation, I would say in a normal situation, because right now we are in unusual circumstance due to the COVID pandemic. In a normal situation, normally the first stage of editorial screening is about 3 weeks or maybe sometime 1 month if at the time there are a lot of papers comes in. And the peer review, normally we allowed one reviewer just about 1 month, but it always turns out that some reviewers have like a family emergency and they ask to extend the length of time to be more 1 month. So you have to be patient. Okay. But during these unusual circumstances, as we know, due to the COVID pandemic, reviewers around the world, they are busy with teaching online, organizing online examination, teaching online, some courses online, and also webinar like me and like Asst. So some reviewers may ask for more. It may take longer for them, not just 1 month, maybe longer than 1 month. And after that, supported is 2 months, but the others, the other reviewer, it happens sometimes like this, that if the one reviewer accepts to evaluate this paper, one paper, but then it turns out that he or she has a problem and quit the job, and I have to find out someone else, so that the time is longer than it should be. But normally it tends to be 1 to 2 months for peer review process, except that we need a third reviewer. In that case, it would take longer to 3 or 4 months. But in these unusual circumstances, please be patient, because reviewers around the world are so busy, not just busy with online teaching and online organizing their online examination, but also taking care of their children as well. So it may take longer than usual. So please be patient.
Right. So for Learn Journal, that's similar, right? Usually, you know, when you submit a paper, right, we cannot manage any newly submitted papers right away, because, you know, we have, as I told you, we have been receiving a lot of articles, manuscripts every day, right? But, you know, we are going to look at the new manuscripts twice a week, right? And we are going to evaluate the initial quality, right? We are going to initially evaluate the quality of the paper and make a decision whether or not we are going to do the peer review, right? But usually, right, maybe this may take time, right? Like 1 month, okay? And then usually, you know, when we give it to reviewers, right, we make it, we emphasize to them that please get your review done in 2 or 3 weeks. Usually we say 14 days, right? But some reviewers are busy, as Dr. Kandaporn has mentioned, and they would, ask for extension like 3 or maybe even 4 weeks, right? But, somebody may say, oh, don't wait for me, right? I'm too busy, find a new reviewer. So, finding a reviewer is also a painstaking activity, right? Because, sometimes, you submit the topic that is very narrow, right? And there seems to be only a few people who are specialists in that particular topic. So we have to make sure that your manuscript has been reviewed by the right persons, right? This may be the reason why you may have to be waiting for a long time. Maybe let's say 2 or 3 months, right? And after we get the results, right, we are going to contact the authors, right? And if your paper has been accepted, right, with revision, let's say major revision, maybe it's it is the author's right side, because sometimes it takes the author a month to revise, but some authors need more time. Yeah, it's especially if you are dealing with major revision, maybe it's gonna take you like 2 or 3 months. But that's fine, right? That's fine. We are not going to urge you to revise, right? Because if you cannot make it, but if you can wait, right? It's going to appear in the next issue, right? Maybe not in the issue this year, maybe next year, something like that, right? But for graduate students who want to get published and graduate, right? If you revise and you submit it again, and we are going to check what you have revised against the reviewer's comments, we are going to issue you a letter of acceptance, right? Okay.
Thank you so much, Ajahn Supakorn and Ajahn Kandaporn. Do we have more questions?
Yes, there are more questions. So the next question is, if you could go back in time to tell your younger self who just started in the field, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Right. This is like, we are in the Miss Universe
Right.
arena, right? Yeah. Maybe Ajahn Kandaporn, would you like to answer first?
Okay, I'll share my experience when I was a PhD candidate and I have to get a paper published, as it is the condition to graduate. And my thesis concerns humor, and and it's quite difficult for me to find a journal that is related particularly to this topic. But fortunately, there's one in America, which is International Journal of Humor Research. But I have to, as a novice author, I have to revise my manuscript, if I remember correctly, 3 times before I can accept it, before my paper was accepted. And the day that I got the email from the editor that my paper is accepted was the day that I have to submit the thesis to the graduate school. You see that I was in a tense situation at that time. So if I would like to make suggestions to novice author or someone who are going to graduate. So you better be well planned at the very beginning of your study. So don't wait until you complete your research and then shop around for a journal that you could publish your paper. If you start your research and you find something that's interesting, not the whole research, because we can't put the whole thesis as one article in a journal. So you just pick up some parts. If you develop your research and you find something interesting, So you can cut that part to write a paper and submit it earlier as soon as possible. So to be safe, to play safe, I mean, so that you can graduate in time.
Right, right. I want to share with you the same similar story like what Dr. Kandaporn has done, right? Yeah, as a PhD student, right, we want to graduate in time, right? Because we have time constraints, right? So after I have written down the paper to be submitted, right, the journal I submitted, right, into a good journal in Thailand, right? And actually, some colleagues of mine said, why don't you try international journal elsewhere? And I did not, because I was afraid that number one, my paper was not good enough, and number two, I don't want to wait for a long time, because if you want to publish your first journal, sometimes you aim low, like what I did, right? Which is good, right? Because you are increasing your chance to get published, right? But later on, it got published, right? And you are proud of your publication, the first publication in your life, for example. Yeah. But later on, you might be regretting. You might a bit regret, because your work, which is based on PhD dissertation, is big enough, is good enough, and it should be published in good journal, right? But you have to have patience, right? A classmate of mine submitted her PhD-based article to RELC journal, right? And the editor said, "Oh, it's a good paper, but you have to wait for a year, right? You have to wait for a year, right? At least 1 year, right?" But she was patient, and she said, "That's okay. I can extend my PhD study stay here. Yeah, I have no rush," right? And finally, yeah, she got her paper published in RELC journal, which is ranked in quartile 1 of Scopus, right? So sometimes we have different conditions, right? Some who wants to graduate, yeah, as soon as they can. Maybe they have not many choices, something like that.
Joy, can I say something, Joy?
Sure. Let me acknowledge Professor Willie Hernandaya.
Yes.
Go on.
Yes. I just want to share a couple of things. The first one is about rejection.
Yes.
I think for novice writers, it's extremely important for you to understand what rejection is all about. Rejection is not a bad thing. Actually, rejection is a good thing, because that's a learning opportunity for you. If you have sent 10 papers to different journals and all your 10 papers have been accepted, I think you should be worried, because you may have sent your papers to the wrong journals, to the kind of journals that Ajahn Supakorn said to be predatory journals. So rejection actually is not a bad thing. You just need to keep trying and trying until eventually you are able to get your papers published in a good journal. Point number 2, extremely important for junior, early career researchers. I think we need to have a longer term plan. We need a 5-year plan at least. 5-year plan, or even a 10-year plan. If you just want to get published, if you just want to get one paper published and then retire afterwards, that's not a good thing to do. I think you need to have a 5-year plan at least. And within that 5-year plan, you'll be able to learn a lot. You'll be able to, understand the kind of papers that can be accepted by good journals, and you understand better why your papers get rejected. If you have a 5-year plan, then what do you do within that 5 years? My advice, this is to everyone actually, is for you to spend at least half an hour or 1 hour writing every day. Writing. And when I say writing, that very often means rewriting. That very often means revising. That very often means changing, adding things on a daily basis. And after a while, you will feel that ideas flow, very smoothly, and you find the whole thing not as challenging as before. The best way to learn writing is by writing and nothing else. So that would be my advice. My last point, if after 5 years or after 10 years, you have not been able to publish a paper, then perhaps it's time for you to reconsider, your career. Maybe writing is not for you. Maybe teaching is for you. Maybe you are one of those people who are very good in, working with students in the classroom. You are an excellent teacher, and you can stay that way. Being a teacher is not a bad thing. So those are some of the points that I want to share with, with you all. I would also like to praise the two presenters, Ajahn Supakorn and Ajahn Kandaporn. They did a good job, and they've been doing a great service to the community by being chief editors of two of the best journals in Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Really. And I guess that's really true, because I think rejection helps you to draw your next plan. It gives you an idea what else to improve on. So thank you so much for that takeaway. Let's move on to the next question. Jack?
All right, for the next question, it's still about the rejection rate, okay? So I'd like to know the rejection rate of both journals. Let's say if I submit 10 papers, how many will get rejected?
Currently, for Pasa, it's about 40 to 45%. So it might be 4 out of 6 papers.
Right. The same thing applies to Learn Journal. But usually, if you submit any manuscript to our journal and finally it got rejected for whatever reason, right? Some authors, we encourage them to submit new manuscript, right? But don't do it right away, right? Maybe you can take your time and study the guidelines of the journal, because if you submit it and it's of more or less the same quality, it's going to get rejected again, right? I received one manuscript from our neighboring country. Is about textbook evaluation, but the quality of the paper is not so good. So the editorial team decided to reject it, right? Before sending it to reviewers, right? And then 2 weeks later, similar paper from the same group of authors has been submitted, right? And they are based on the same research study, right? So we have to reject it again, right? Because the quality of the research, the quality of the writing is quite poor, right? So I would suggest that as Dr. Willie said, right? Even though you got rejected, right? Don't be sad, because you can get the good feedback, right? And you can revise your manuscript based on the feedback and submit to another journal, right? Okay, this is going to improve the quality of your paper.
Thank you so much. Let's have the next question, Jack.
Okay, for the next question, is it possible to share briefly what an idea sharing article is and looks like in Pasa journal?
Well, it's kind of a research article, but it's of a small scale. This article happens a few years ago because some teachers they want to share their experience in their class. For example, they create some activities and without any expectation that it would work well, but it turns out that students in the class enjoy these activities, so that teacher ran it again. But the second time, he asked the student to write reflection. So after that, after the second time, he ran the same activity. He gathered all the reflection and analyze the reflection, classify all what the students say, the attitudes and the benefits from the activities that he created, and then he write a small paper to us. For example, one teacher's he wrote to me that he taught vocabulary at the very beginning of the semester, and almost at the end of the semester, the last activity is the speaking to test speaking skill, but he needs to prepare his student for the examination as well. So he designed the activity for speaking skill in this way that, okay, student got back to the first unit. Any vocabulary, any adjective that in the first chapter, you can pick up that adjective to be your own character, and you play have a role in a way that your classmates can guess what you are. Like you got the term greedy, you got the term moody. So how you should act, you should speak, you should talk in your sort of presentation, like give a display to the class and let that classmate make a guess that this person represents this attitude. So this very beneficial to the students in terms of they have two opportunities. One is to revise, to review what they have learned, and also to prepare for the examination. And the other is to practice their speaking skill. So this is quite creative activity. And he wrote this thought discussion papers to me, and our reviewer find that, oh, this one is interesting. We never thought about we never thought about it before, that it would turn out to be like you use only one stone, like the in Western we say that you use one stone to kill two birds, something like that.
Thank you so much, Ajahn Kandaporn. Let's have the next question from Bam.
Yes, Kazan. So the question is, what is the biggest challenge being an editor or editor-in-chief or managing editor?
You know, working as an editor-in-chief, right? It is quite, yeah, for me, it's challenging, right? And I'm very happy working as an editor. I have been working as an editor for almost 10 years, right? And, you know, maybe sometimes, right? Yeah, this could be burdensome because, you know, we have to teach, right? And sometimes we have to do some administrative work, right? And whatever, right? And sometimes this is very time consuming and it could be stressful, especially, you know, if you are working with authors who don't seem to understand your reason of rejection. You know, sometimes, you know, we got some letters of complaint, right? Asking about why, you know, the paper got rejected, right? Last month, right, I got an email of complaint, letter of complaint asking why we rejected their manuscript. But you know, the manuscript is on teaching mathematics, right? Teaching and learning mathematics, right? Which is, you know, totally not what we are going to consider, right? But they say, but you know, and you know, they wrote it back and they say, but you say learn journal, learn, this is learn, right? We learn something, but that's because, you know, they haven't even, you know, studied our author's guidelines, right? And you know, sometimes, you know, they have some harsh feelings, right? So sometimes, you know, working as an editor can be very stressed, right? Okay, Ajahn Kandaporn, any experience?
The same, we are in the same situation. So two most challenging things for editors is to work in time, to manage a lot of papers in time, and to handle with people that cannot stand our rejection. For example, there's one case, the author call me, not just email me, call me that why my paper is rejected. and I have to explain in addition to my email about half an hour until that person satisfied with my answer, because her paper is out of the scope, but he or she argued that you said on the website that you also accept the paper that concern about language and identity, and this person study about Twitter, how people chat in Twitter, and the author gather all the keywords that mostly happen in Twitters, and at the end he make a conclusion that what's the most popular topics that people tend to talk in Twitters, and use these words, some certain words, as evidence to show that these are evidence to show that people in Twitter tends to talk about these issues. These are popular topics in Twitters. I explained to the author that for our journal, Language and Identity, it doesn't mean that it means that if you analyze Twitter, you have to show that the language in Twitter, or people who tweet use language in a different way from people who use Facebook or Instagram or any other social medias. And this certain linguistics becomes their characteristics, or becomes a character. So whenever you use such a hashtag, people know that you are people who love to tweet instead of people who prefer to talk in Facebook. So language and identity in the scope of Phasa is that language show or related to your identity, but his or her paper is that what people in Twitter talk about. So it's the content that people talk about. It's not it's not the character of the people who tweet, and the evidence or the linguistics evidence doesn't show that this is the identity. This is the spatial character of people in Twitter that are different of people who are using Facebook, who are using Instagram. So this is what I have to explain about half an hour, apart from explain my email. So this is another challenging job. I have also to give a good example to this person that we have one author that he went to a camp that there are a lot of refugees, and these refugees have different L1s, but they have to study English, and their English turned out to be like make them have special characters. So so this makes the refugee of the same camp have different characters due to their language, due to their Englishes. So this is what we mean, language and identity, not in that sense. Okay. So it took me half an hour that day to explain this to the author. So this is what the other challenging thing to editors. Even though we try to make it clear on our website, still there's people get confused about the scope of our journal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jans. Let's have the next two
Sorry,
questions.
before we move on, let me share one thing. Yeah,
Sure.
this often comes to me, right? As an editor, sometimes we have received some paper. This is very useful, right? And it can prevent you from running a risk of this, right? For example, you are doing your PhD dissertation, which is a big scale, right? And in research methodology, you are using different elicitation devices to get the data, right? For example, you are working on collocational knowledge of EFL students, right? And you use a test, right? Like let's say, multiple choice test and then essay, right? And you also interview them, right? Okay, but when you want to publish your paper, some of the writers want to publish into journals, you know what I mean, right? I mean, because because of their big scale of their research project, right? So they are quite confident that they can get published in 2 or 3 journals, and then they divide their findings into into separate findings, right? And they submit it to one of the journals. For example, maybe you submit only the qualitative part, the interview, to Learn Journal. But actually, what you are doing is, you are ruining the purpose of triangulation, because we are using more than one data collection methods. Because we want to enhance the reliability, right? The validity of your results, right? But if you divide them, if you separate them, right, this is going to reduce the quality of your research study, right? Even if it was not the case, right? But you cannot mention, right, to the editor that actually you collected the data using 3 methods, but you just mentioned only the interview, right? Or even if you mentioned that other methods be used, right? The editor would ask you anyway, right? Why haven't you included the other 2 elicitation devices in your paper? Something like that. So this will make you. This could be one of the reasons why your paper gets rejected easily, right? So I mean, don't try to separate your the way you collected the data, right? Okay.
Thank you, Jack. Jack, let's have the next questions.
Okay, maybe one last question
Okay.
about ISI index.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are the requirements and qualities you mentioned about your journals true to all ISI index journal?
Okay, so let me answer first, right? To the best of my knowledge, ISI or Thomson Reuters, right? This used to be is the predecessor of Scopus, right? In the past, people we admired any journals index in ISI, and right now ISI is still very good and respectable. ISI has been changed to Web of Science, right? And under ISI there are four sisters, right? We say four sub branches under ISI, right? And one of them is SSCI, Social Citation Index, right? Which is very compatible with our field, right? You have to be careful because Web of Science or ISI, if you want to get promoted, for example, if you want to ask for your assistant professorship, associate professorship, or even professorship, if that journal is indexed in emerging, it's called ESCI, emerging something, right? That's the please note that that's the latest database under Web of Science, but is not recognized by Ministry of Education. I mean the Ministry of Mahesi, right? Yeah, because Assoc, right? OHEC, Assoc no longer exists, but it's not accepted, right? You have to make sure that your paper got published in the real ISI, right? In SSCI, yeah, to be more precise, right? So with regard to this question, right, I would say that the quality of ISI, or we would say Web of Science and Scopus are similar, right? But actually, they are rivals. They are business rivals, right? Yeah, yeah, I would say because many. If you take a look at good journals, right, like TESOL Quarterly, they are indexed in both Web of Science and Scopus, right? While some journals like Learn, we just got the breakthrough in getting indexed in only Scopus, right? Yeah, but you have to be careful because oftentimes I have seen some predatory journals, some bogus journals, and they say their papers are indexed in ISI, but ISI, that's a fake database. ISI for them means something else. Right. Yeah. It doesn't stand for Thomson Reuters. Right. Yeah. They are going to cheat us. Right. They are going to deceive you. So be careful. Or sometimes I have even come across some journals. Yeah. And they say they are indexed in Scopus. But the Scopus is spelled differently. Yeah. Not Scopus. It's pronounced Scopus, but it's a fake database or fake metric, right? So you have to be very careful, right? Or some journals, they even just to make money, right? They cajole money out of the authors and they say we are indexed in Scopus, but actually, right, the duration of the index has been terminated maybe 2 years ago, something like that. So you have to be very, very careful, right? Go and check in the Scopus website if you are university lecturers or graduate students, right? And make sure that, the journal that you are interested in is still in Scopus, right? Otherwise, it's a waste of your time. Thank you.
For me, it's the same as Supakorn has just mentioned, that in the past, ISI contained mostly journals in the hard size, not in the soft size. Just recently that they accept journals from soft size. So it turned out to be like only a few journals in a soft side can compete to get a seat to be indexed in this database. So I think it's the identity or the look of ISI in the past, that they contain mostly journals in hard size instead of soft size, while Scopus contains more journals of soft size. So that's the difference.
Thank you so much, Ajans. I think we have another interesting question. The question is, what should the authors do to handle the conflicting comments from the two reviewers? Like one say add this, the other say delete this.
Well, it depends on, for example, if the recommendation from the other reviewers would be more useful or more beneficial to the others. So the other choose to follow that suggestion and say no to the other suggestion. But they would give me reasons why.
So can you ask again?
Yes, Ajahn. The question is, what should the authors do to handle the conflicting comments from the two reviewers? Like one says, add this, the other says, delete this.
Right, yeah. So as Ajahn Kandaporn said, right, I mean, if the review results are conflicting, right, we have to look for the third reviewers, right? But sometimes we have to look at the generosity degree, right, of the reviewer as well. Some readers are a bit tough, right? Some readers are too kind, right? So sometimes we take a look. Some reviewers may say, for Learn Journal there are 5 levels. Number 1, which is almost always impossible. This is called accept without revision, right? Yeah. And then accept with minor revision if the paper is very good, right? Accept with major revision, right? Accept it with major revision is, you know, the majority. And then resubmit with major revision. This is like it almost fails, right? But, you know, the reviewers are kind enough to give the authors some opportunity to revise the paper on the condition that something could be added to the paper, right? And the last one is reject, right? If the paper gets rejected, right? I mean, the decision is final, and you know the author cannot resubmit it, right, to the journal, right? But you know, sometimes we from the same paper, right? The first reviewer would say accept with minor revision. The second one would say accept with major revision. That's still okay, acceptable, because they are close. But if one say reject and the author say accept with minor revision, as an editor, I have to take a look at the feedback and the comment, because you know some reviewers, they rejected the paper without giving any convincing reason. They just say reject because of the low quality of the paper, but you know, giving no, they give no reasons, right? So in such a way, we are going to ask for more reasons from that rejecting reviewers, right? But if the reviewers cannot provide more reasons, we are going to find more reviewers, and we are going to reject that review. We are going to blacklist the reviewers, right? Sometimes, you know, we even have a list of blacklisted, you know, reviewers, right? Blacklisted reviewers mean they don't review in a very acceptable way, right? Sometimes they reject without giving any reasons, or maybe, you know, they just give no comment, right? Just only a few minor points on grammatical errors, right? Something like that. So, you know, we will never ask them again, right? Okay.
Thank you, Ajahn. Let's have the last question. This is coming from, I believe, a PhD student. The question goes, if we decide to submit a manuscript about our unpublished thesis or dissertation, do we still need to paraphrase, summarize, or rewrite, since the original thesis or dissertation is not available to the public?
Well, a research paper, okay, can you hear me? Okay. Well, a research paper is not a thesis. That's the first thing that for a novice author have to be concerned about. So don't just cut or pick up some parts of your thesis and put it in a format of research paper right away and submit it to the editor, because the style of writing is different, and the way to present your findings, your research gaps, it's different from writing a thesis. So don't just cut, okay, this part of thesis and submit it as a manuscript. That is, you will be asked to rewrite it, and that will be a waste of time.
Right. So Ajahn Kandaporn, I couldn't agree more, right? So I mean, you have to try hard, right? After you have written down your thesis, right? The next step, or maybe the last step, is to write your article, right? So your article must be based on the main findings of your dissertation, right? But you cannot copy and paste, right? Just summarize, because you know, I'm quite sure that, you know, if you are working on any kind of thing in language teaching, right, your dissertation might be very thick, like 300 pages, 400 pages, right? So, you know, it's impossible for you to transfer everything from your dissertation, and you cannot, because number one, you are going to do something called self-plagiarism. Number two, you have to summarize, because if you just cut and paste, right, you are going, your work is going to be incoherent. Your article will be incoherent. So my suggestion is that you write it again. Yeah, you summarize the main point. And I agree with Ajahn Kandaporn that the research paper to be submitted to a journal, and your PhD dissertation, they are of different genres, right? Yeah, when you write dissertation, it's very long, sometimes boring, and you have to give details, every detail, right? But you know, in writing your journal articles, all the main points must be summarized, and you have only the main points. Some graduate students have misconceptions. They think that, okay, I am going to sum up the main points, but they take the same format. Actually, this is true and false, right? True in the sense that there are some journals that accept. I mean, some journals, even though they are international journals, they are not what? They are not demanding, right? They are not demanding, and they just, okay, your paper look good. It looks like, you know, it has components in your dissertation. We accept that. But, you know, if you look at, you know, high-ranked journals like System, TESOL Quarterly, Second Language Writing, I think Dr. Willie can share more in June, right? We are talking about the mainstream publication, right? So if you take a look at the mainstream publications, you may realize that they have different ways of writing, right? The literature would be very, reduced. It is going to be very short, right? But you know, the way the literature has been reviewed is done in a critical way, right? And you know, they focus more on methodology and the findings and discussion, right? Something like that. So I think there are two different kinds. It depends on what journal you are going to submit your papers to. But my advice is that you browse, you know, for example, if you are interested in this journal, let's say Learn, right? You go to the archives and you study, you look at the published journals, published articles, sorry, right? What they look like, right, in general. Okay, so you know, you can see what kind of papers the journal accept, right? And you have to evaluate, you assess your own ability whether or not you can come up with the paper in such a way or not, right? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ajahn. I guess let's have the very last question since it's quite timely. The question is, are there any interesting topics about COVID-19 in relation with language?
Okay, let me answer first, right? I'm working on corpus linguistics, and you know, if anyone here, one of the audience are working on language corpora, you should know COCA, the Corpus of Contemporary American English. And I just got an email from Professor Mark Davies, right, who is the creator of COCA. COCA is good because, you know, it's one of the biggest corpora representing American English, and you know, it's free of charge, right? Anyone can use it without paying, right? And you know, now they have just compiled a big corpus. I cannot remember how big it is, but it's quite big, of coronavirus. So if you are working on anything related to that, right? Yeah, it's going to be very useful. For example, you may want to study lexical bundles, right? You may do critical discourse analysis, looking at the way people think about how serious the COVID-19 is, something like that, right? This is quite recent, and I have seen right now there are some journals that welcome special issue on, you know, papers about COVID-19, right? So, you know, you may make use of the corpus that I mentioned, right, in analyzing the data.
For me, I would the same as Ajahn Supakorn had just said about corpus. Recently, a professor submitted a paper about idioms used in English newspaper. But that one is idioms that used before the COVID-19. So I think that after this, the language will turn different. as we are in the era that we said that we use the new normal practice. So maybe the language is changing as well. So idioms in the sense of after the COVID-19 or based on the new normal practice, maybe you can study or you can conduct a new research on this as well. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Just one
Go on,
sentence
Dr.
from me,
Willie.
if I may.
Yes.
Just one sentence. If I may give some advice, I would rather that you stay away from anything to do with COVID-19. The reason being, it's seasonal, it's hot at the moment, but 2 or 3 years down the road, nobody will remember what COVID-19 is like. So stay away. Unless you have got the time, you have got the energy to do something fun, then that's fine. My worry is that 2 or 3 years down the road, people will not remember, people will not cite your work, and that will be counterproductive. My
It
advice.
might be like the time that SARS outbreak, and
Yes,
then it's
gone.
gone.
It's gone, and nobody remembers what it was like.
Yeah.
And it's not pedagogically useful, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
seasonal.
agree.
It's a seasonal topic.
Right. Seasonal.
Thank you so much for that.
One last thing before we leave the meeting, right? If you are interested in submitting your book review to any Scopus Index journal, please keep in mind that Scopus never indexes book reviews. I don't know what is the reason behind, but if you publish in any Scopus Index journal, if you write academic article, it's indexed in Scopus. If you write research article, they are indexed in Scopus, but book reviews are never indexed in Scopus. Right.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And we would like to thank our dear speakers for gracing this webinar series. Assistant Professor Dr. Kandaporn Jaroenkitboworn, Associate Professor Dr. Supakorn Phoocharoensil. And we would also like to thank the EIL Program Committee for making this webinar sessions possible. And we are looking forward to seeing you in our next webinar series. Our next webinar series is entitled Reinventing English Language Teaching and Testing in the Midst of Digital Transformation, which is happening on the 4th of June, 10 a.m. to 12 Thailand time. Thank you once again for joining us today, and see you all on the next session.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.